Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Midnight Monster Horror Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Corey, and today alongside me, I have potentially future host, my brother, Tony, aka Oreo. What's going on, man?
How you doing, brother?
All right, man. But yeah, so like I said, he's going to be potential. I think he's going to start hosting with Daniel and myself tonight. It's just going to be Frosty. It's going to be Tony and myself. Frosty's kind of a little under the weather, so he's going to join us probably on the next one. Um, but yeah, tonight we've got a very special um, review on Dario Argento's Tenebrea. You excited about this one, Tony?
Oh, dude, I'm thrilled, man. I couldn't have got asked to come on the show at a more prevalent time than when you throw in some Italian horror, man. Because it's one of my favorite subgenres of horror. I mean, I love the output. I love it. It's just, I'm telling you, man, something about Italian horror. It's the way they shoot and film their scenes and the style and it it's hard for most people to get into because most mainstream people, they like a straightforward narrative, and sometimes with Italian horror you don't really get that. You get more style over substance. But in this film, the narrative is pretty straightforward, so it's more easily digestible for a mainstream movie fan to pop Tenebrea in and check it out and really enjoy it. So
Yeah, I will say out of all the giallos and all the Italian horror films that I have in my collection, um, I think this is honestly probably the most watched out of the whole thing.
mhm.
Um, for me, this is probably one of my favorites from Dario, along with obviously Deep Red is another one of my favorites, but even still, I mean, this one takes the cake. Um, but I usually pop those two in definitely. And I don't visit obviously the Three Mothers trilogy as much as I should. I need to get back into it. Um, Another one is was it Opera? Opera's another great one
uh,
that I love popping in and watching too.
Opera's fantastic.
Yes.
And sadly, that was like toward the tail end of Argento really being at his peak. That was the movie that kind of started his decline. I mean, some people like Stendhal and Trauma, but he and Sleepless too. Sleepless was another film, but that's what most fans would say his downfall started after Opera, because Opera was his last great film. So
Yeah.
yep.
Yep. Yep. Yep. So
Mhm.
definitely looking forward to this one. I've been wanting to do this review for a while now, so I'm glad that you're here, part of this one. This is gonna be a
Uh, I'm
fun one.
glad you. I'm glad you invited me on, man. I'm ready to get the ride started.
All right. Well, first of all, since you're gonna start hosting and be a co-host of the show, why don't you tell a little bit about your collection, where you started, and how long you've been doing it? What you,
Oh,
how many you got, if you can count that high?
yeah, I kind of stopped counting a while ago. Started getting tedious, but yeah, I mean, I've been a horror fan since, I mean, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, maybe. Um, Going into the video stores, back when those were a thing. Going into the video stores and just going down the horror section, man, looking at all the cover art, all the VHS cover art. I distinctly remember two um, that really gravitated, or that really drew me in. And they were really, I mean, one of them's a really obscure movie that not too many people have heard of, but one of them was Dr. Giggles. I remember that artwork. And I remember actually the poster. I remember the movie, or the video store we used to go to had a poster outside, and it was a Dr. Giggles poster. I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then I remember going down the aisle and seeing the box and just picking it up and just being like, oh man, this looks wicked. The other one it's a weird movie called Bleeders. Um, it was really cool. It was a box, but it had like a blood pack in it, so it had the face of the creatures on them, but there was blood and stuff that you could kind of articulate and move around, which is really neat.
That's
But those are two that I distinctly remember. And of course, growing up, I watched Friday the 13th, the whole series. I'm a Friday fanboy. I That's my favorite franchise, and I mean, I'm unapologetic about it. But I mean, growing up on Jason and you know, just picking out what I could. My mom was kind of lenient about me watching stuff at that age, and she was it was cool. And I watched, I first horror movie I ever saw was Halloween, and that's the one that did it for me. It's like, yep, this is what I love. After seeing that movie, it hit all the right notes for me, and it just started me off on this journey. And then me and you, I mean, we got a history of knowing each other a long time, and used to work at a video rental store called Movie Gallery.
hmm
And yeah, and I would go in there and I'd be like, "Hey, Corey, we both knew we loved horror," and I was like, "Hey, man, you got any recommendations for me? Any good things to check out?" And at that time, you recommended Hatchet, and I watched the Hatchet movie, and it just blew me away. I was like, "Man, this is like a love letter to the Friday the 13th movies, the classic 80s slasher films. This is like a love letter to it." And
yeah,
that was probably in '07. I mean, Hatchet came out in '06, but I mean, it was readily available to rent around '07, '08. So that
yeah.
kind of got me pushing to actually collect. And at that time, DVD was hot. People were,
hmm
I mean, collectors were. It was all about DVDs and getting your collection up there. And I would go out and seek out these really hard to find out of print um, DVDs, and it started me on a journey. And I don't know, man. Last time I counted, I was at like 3,000, something like that. And
Jeez.
yeah, I just gave up after 3,000. I'm like, dude, there's no way I'm want to keep counting this. This is insane. So yeah, and that's and the Blu-rays that would put it over too, because I've been really heavy on Blu-rays lately. Um, Picking them up, not so much recently, but what I can. If there's a good release that comes out or something like that, I'll definitely. If it's the movie I absolutely love, yeah, I got to get it on Blu-ray. But yeah, man, I'm always been a physical media guy. I love having the artwork and the disc, and I don't know, man. It's like how book collectors collect books. I'm the same way with movies.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's honestly something about just kind of walking up on your collection. You get the notion that you have 4 hours to watch two movies, and you stand there for 2 hours
Two of
staring
those
at all
hours
the
trying to find something.
spines.
Absolutely, man. I can't tell you how many countless nights I've done that.
Yeah,
Just trying to find something that strikes my fancy or something I'm into or like a subgenre. I'm like, hey, I need to check that out or something, and I'll spend hours just digging through everything trying to find something. It's
yeah,
crazy. I waste more time looking than I do actually watching. So
yeah, yeah. Honestly, like I've been on a major kick trying to knock down my backlog because I've got so many films that I haven't seen in the collection. So, but yeah, I've been knocking that out.
no doubt,
But
man.
you've been collecting around the same time that I've been collecting, maybe just a little bit longer. So I would say the better half of 10 years.
Yeah.
You've been probably collecting for about 10 years now.
Yep.
So
About 10 years. Absolutely.
been been right around the same amount of time for me. Of course, I remember when walking in your house and seeing just one little shelf, and now you walk in your house and you got a whole room plus on the floor, right?
Right. Yeah. It's
So
turned into a wall of horror.
yeah,
Literally a
mine
wall.
mine is now in two separate rooms. It's just because of space.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's something about it. It like to your point, looking through the spines and trying to find something to watch. It's nostalgic for me, man. It brings me back to the days when I was at the video store and I would look around to find a cover that would draw me in because that's how you sell those movies. You have a good cover, you have a good tagline, and then boom, your interest is piqued and you want to watch it. So, I mean, it just brings me back. It's more like nostalgia for me because we just grew up in that time, that glorious time, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, no, I mean, to your story, I've got a similar story. There used to be a place that actually Movie Gallery bought out years ago called Movies. It was literally movies, like a cow mooing, and there was a cow as the mascot of the company. Um, but the I just remember always walking in there, and of course, back in those times they didn't have DVDs, so it was just strictly VHS. But I
mhm.
remember walking through there and seeing Dead Alive all the time, and just that cover art always drew me in, and it was like, and that I gotta watch that. But it was almost, as a child, it's almost, kind of taboo. You don't want to ask your parents to watch it, but at the same time, you want to sneak and watch it,
Absolutely.
So that was one that I always wanted to watch. And then I remember being out with you in the wild one day and just movie hunting. And I actually came across it and I was like, holy shit, there's that title. And I
There
bought
it
it
is.
and loved it ever since.
Hell yeah. That's such a goofy flick, man.
It
It
really
really
is.
is. The
It's a
comedy is
fun one.
insane.
Yeah. Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson needs to go back to horror films.
I thought I remember hearing something about he might make a comeback, or he's no. What I heard was he's actually um putting out a lot of his back catalog um on the Blu-ray and I think 4K. So he's starting to kind of get back into it a little bit. So maybe that'll kind of like turn the wheels and maybe get him behind the camera and direct another horror film or two or three. I mean, as many as he can because he really has a good eye for it. So
Yeah.
to get him back would be a win for everybody, all the genre fans.
I think so because I think secretly everyone loves obviously that film in particular. He did another one. Which one did he do? Was it did he do Bad Taste as well?
He did. Yes, he did. He did
Okay.
do Bad
Yeah.
Taste. Hmm.
Yeah. We watched that together, didn't we?
Absolutely. That was a yeah, that was a fun movie night.
That was a fun one.
Absolutely.
Um, so yeah, have you picked up anything this week?
This week, no, I haven't really picked up anything this week. Last week we went to another shout out, Scratch and Spin. Eric, I mean, we've been shopping, going to Scratch and Spin for years, man. And I just popped in. I was out there getting my car worked on and popped in. I was like, man, I haven't seen Eric in a while, so I popped in the shop and I was browsing around the movie section and I was like, oh, okay. I found a couple of, or I found one movie in particular I bought last week called Screenplay. It's a trauma film, but it's not like a trauma film, if that makes any sense. It's not goofy. It's not full of comedy. It's not slapstick or anything like that. It's more of a serious, like black and white, like almost like abstract film, um, avant-garde film, if you will, that I heard about on the shout out to 22 Shots of News and Horror podcast that I love to listen to frequently. They recently did a top 1985 show, and that popped up on a couple of their lists. So I was like, oh man, I got to check that out. So I grabbed that, and then I grabbed another film called Tigers Are Not Afraid. I think it came out a couple years ago. It's a Mexican film, like a
Hmm.
Mexican fantasy horror film that looks pretty cool. So yeah, those are the only two pickups I had last week, man.
Right on. Yeah, I actually had two of them. One actually came in today in the mail, so I was pretty excited about it. Honestly, it's been kind of on my radar for a while. But that's the new Suspiria film, and yeah, like I said, I haven't been able to pick it up, and I finally was able to finally get it, so I was quite pleased with that buy. Um,
How fitting, how fitting with reviewing a Argento film tonight.
yeah, yeah, quite fitting.
Yep.
Um, but the other one was Tigers Are Not Afraid. So funny story about that one. That was pretty much a blind buy. Basically, uh, I was actually on Facebook and just kind of scrolling through, um, and I just happened to catch a clip of it, and I watched it, and I was like, "That seems to be kind of interesting." And then next thing you know, my wife comes home from Walmart, and she handed me that movie, and it's like, "Oh, well, that works." So it was kind of a blind buy, kind of awesome surprise. So it worked
No doubt, man. It's so funny that me and you picked up the same movie.
pretty much in the same week. Yeah.
Pretty much, yep.
But yeah, with that, like you said, yeah, you gave a quick shout out to Eric at Scratch and Spin. And I just wanted to also relay that a little bit more. We are from the South Carolina area, mainly from the Columbia area. And if you know five, or not 5 points, oh gosh, what is that? Tri-City area.
Yeah, the
Um,
Tri-City area.
yeah, right across from Zesto's, the giant ice cream cone in the sky.
Can't
You
miss
go
it.
over there. Yeah, a little hole in the wall place called Scratch and Spin. You go in there. Um, and you always go in there for quality stuff. If you're a hard collector of anything, whether it be LPs or Blu-rays, I've even seen he's starting to carry 4K stuff. Um, anything, records, uh,
Records, yeah.
yeah, anything that you can imagine that would entertain you is in there. Even classic games, comic books, and action figures. Guy's got it all.
He's even
So
got a little he's even got now he's got a little VHS section. So it's pretty cool.
Did he bring the VHSs back?
Yes, sir, he did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. He's got a little section, not too many, but I mean, it's growing. He's getting more and more. Last time I was in there, he had a smaller section, so I mean, it's been a couple months since I've been in there. So then I checked it out, and it's like, yeah, it's expanded. So
Yeah,
it's really
he's
neat, man.
really well. Yeah, yeah, he's definitely bringing back kind of that feel, and he gets that there's collectors out there, and so he fills his store full of stuff for you to dig through. And even if you don't buy anything, it's still fun to go in there and just look at stuff.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah,
Can't
if
tell you
you're
how
in
many
the
times
South,
I've been in there and just looked, not bought
yeah,
anything, just looked.
yeah, just walk around and then stand there for 30 minutes to an hour just talking to Eric. He's
Oh
a book
yeah.
of knowledge on himself.
He really
You
is,
know,
man. Really friendly guy, really personable. You can go up to him. I mean, he's just a great guy. Known him for years, man. Shout out to him. I mean, people definitely if you're into just all kinds of entertainment, whatever it may be, doesn't have to be horror, doesn't have to be, I mean, anything. He's got it, you know.
oh yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
But all right, man. So you ready to jump into this big old review?
Absolutely, brother.
All right. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and just jump into the synopsis real quick. This is Dario Argento's Tenebrae, and the synopsis is: an American writer in Rome is stalked by a serial killer bent on harassing him while killing all people associated with his work on his latest book, which would be Tenebrae.
Hmm.
So yeah, man. All right. So um, well, shall I go ahead and do a quick disclaimer? This review could potentially have, well, it is going to have spoilers. So if you haven't seen this film, stop right here and go check this film out because this is a great movie.
Absolutely, highly recommended. Highly recommended.
Yep, yep, yep. All right, so you want to jump into the storyline a little bit?
Yes, sir. Essentially, Peter Neal is a horror writer, and he is almost on a publicity tour in Rome, which the film was actually shot in Rome, which is pretty cool. They took advantage of, well, Dario took advantage of a lot of landmarks and stuff with the filming locations, and um, it's interesting. There's a crazy dynamic with his publicist, not his publicist, his agent, played by the legendary John Saxon,
Yeah.
who's been in everything from the original Black Christmas to Nightmare on Elm Street. He's made his way into Italian films. He's been in The Girl Who Knew Too Much, a Mario Bava film,
Mm-hmm.
um, Cannibal Apocalypse. I mean, just so many to name. He's a genre legend. But yeah, his publicist, he comes off as such a sleazy, scummy publicist, like, or not publicist. I keep saying publicist, agent. He's really interested in the money and making sure that Peter, like, it gets all the bang for his buck, so to speak. And completely throws him into the butt. I mean, there's one scene where he said, you know, he's like, oh, I need you to stay here for a week. I need you to stay here for a week. Don't go anywhere. And he's like, well, my life's on the line. No deal that you can make is worth my life. So he's just so sleazy, and he's, but he plays it so well because he's John Saxon. I mean, he's just a legend. But
Yeah.
yeah, Peter. It's funny, so I was, you know, the first scene in the movie, or the intro scene, he's going to the airport to catch his plane to Rome, and he's riding his bike in New York along, on the highway, and he's just he gets to the airport, stops his bike, and there's a car there, and it's a limo, not a limo driver, but his driver, who just gives him his stuff, and he just takes the bike and just leaves and stuff like that. I just thought that was interesting. You just don't see that very often. So,
Mm.
um, but yeah, man, he's he gets there, and just as soon as he gets there, he's uh hounded by two detectives that tell him that there was a murder, and that his book, the pages of his book were stuffed in the girl that was murdered mouth. And then he kind of just takes it there, and kind of helps the police and himself track down who the killer is. And yeah, and then a couple other twists ensue. But it's such a great film, man. I mean, I can't say enough about this film. There's just so many. It's funny that Tenebrae actually in Latin means darkness, which I was talking, about. I was like, man, it's funny. It's ironic that it means darkness, but there's a lot of daytime shots in this film that are just like amazing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of daytime sequences in the film, and they look fantastic. So yeah, man, it's
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much going off of what you said about John Saxon now. Just real quick, this was kind of a first time watch for Daniel, and it just really stinks that he can't be with us tonight. But um, he ultimately this was his first giallo that I introduced him to, and he loved it. Um, and when he seen John Saxon's face, he was like, dude, I've seen his face somewhere. Where, and I remember as a first time watch with you, and I remember saying the same thing. Like that face is just so damn noticeable. Who is this guy?
yep,
And he's got a laundry list of films that he's been in, like in what you were describing. But actually, and the cool thing is uh Frosty uh pulled up the fact that he recognized him from a kung fu film.
yep. I know
And then he
exactly
was like,
which one you're going to talk about too.
yeah, he was like, Enter the Dragon. And I was like,
Yes, sir.
no way, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
this guy's done it all pretty much.
He really
So,
has. He's I mean, he's just a legend. I just wish he would do a convention or something, man. I'd love to meet him and just like pick his brain about all the films he's been in. That would just be
I would,
fantastic. But
I would love to get Tenebrae signed by him.
oh, absolutely, man. I'd teeter on either Tenebrae or Black Christmas, because they're two films that I absolutely adore.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's tough though, man. Yeah, I would probably do Tenebrae too, though. Honestly, he's
Yeah.
just such a fun character in this movie. I love his hat thing. He's got a hat, and he keeps putting it on, and Peter Neal's like, well, are you worried it's going to come off? He's like, no, and he shakes his head around to make sure his hat's staying on his head, and he's a character, man.
Yeah.
And then some guy takes off with his hat, and he's like, wait, and he grabs his hat. He's like, my hat, you can't take off with my hat. He's just so obsessed with the hat, and it's just funny. He like I said, he brings a level to a film that few actors can, and his screen time and his presence is just it's just there. Like it just, I don't know, it kind of draws you in.
Yeah. Yeah. So overall, what's your favorite scenes in this film, man?
Oh man, there's so many. I think one of the best shots in the movie, and I think I tracked it. It's a 2.5 minute crane shot from the two victims, they live together, and Dario just he shoots this crane shot where it goes from one end of the apartment that they live in and it just wraps around it and it just sequences so perfectly. It's so seamless. And it shows that, and I don't want to jump ahead here, but there's two victims that end up getting killed, but it's just such a beautiful scene, man. I think it's I never you never see a sequence like that in films. And the funny
Yeah.
thing was that um I was doing a little bit of research on it. The American distributors that picked up the film wanted Argento to cut that scene, and he's like, "No, there's no way I'm cutting that scene. I'm proud of that scene." And I think absolutely he made the right decision with that scene. It's gorgeous, but there's so many. And I sound weird saying this, but something with Italian films, they make murder sequences beautiful. It's almost like art.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's so many stylistic killing or murder sequences in this film. It's incredible, man.
Yeah.
One scene in particular, a girl's putting her shirt on, and the killer, who has a razor blade, slashes through the shirt, and you see her silhouette through the shirt, and then he slashes again, and then there's just blood spurt, and it
Hmm.
just it's so like the way it's edited, the way it's shot is so stylistic, and it's just Argento to a T. That's just what he does, man. He's a master behind the camera, and it just shows. And um, there's so many sequences in that. There's so many like it's weird to call murder beautiful, but he just finds a way to make it look artistic. It's crazy, man. Um, but no, man, that crane shot though, and then some of the murder sequences and some of the daytime shots and just some of the random stuff. Like I know we're gonna get to the dog, which
Yeah.
yeah, that's a oh my god, that whole sequence is hilarious. Oh my god, it had me cracking up.
Yeah.
Uh, but I don't know, man. What are some of your favorite shots in the film?
Well, I mean, obviously, right away is yes the two. Is it? Well, I guess it wasn't really announced that they were lesbians, but I took it as they were lesbians. But yeah, the apartment sequence, the whole scene where he wraps around the whole apartment, and again, like you said, there's an art to Italian films almost,
Mhm.
and that is I remember talking to you while we were watching it for the first time, and I think we raised the question, what if he accidentally left the camera on as he was just moving the boom around, you
Right.
know? And then went, you know what? This fucking works, and left it in the film.
Hmm.
That would really be interesting. If I ever meet Dario Argento, I would love to ask him that. Um, and I would love to see if that's if that was pure accident art or not.
Or not? Yeah.
Um,
With Argento,
but
you just never can tell. He's
no,
almost methodical in his filmmaking. He's very methodical. So I mean to the point where he and me and you know this, he when he's filming his the sequences of the killer with the gloves on, because that's a giallo trope. The killer has to wear black gloves or gloves in general. And
yes,
Argento always wants it to be his hands because he wants to get the shot right. So
yeah,
he wants to perform with the gloves on. So he's just very methodical. He's just a legend. He's just a smart filmmaker. Learn from the best. I mean, learn from Bava, a legend in Italian filmmaking in general, not just horror, but in general, just a master of cinema in Italy. So, I mean, he's learned from the best. He's got it, and that's why he is deemed the Giallo King. I mean, he just knows how to shoot a beautiful Giallo every time, and he does it well. And this one, I think this is one of um his highlights in his career. Honestly, man. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. I mean, everybody loves Suspiria and Deep Red and stuff like that, but Tenebrea is just on another level, man. I'm telling you. I mean, it's hard to say another level. It's a different film. It's more of a his way of knocking back at the critics or who deem him a misogynist pig and somebody that enjoys you know the murder and killing beautiful women and this like that. And I know when he wrote this film, he was having a problem with an obsessed fan who would call him and harass him and give him death threats and stuff like that. So this was kind of like his reaction to that, writing this film, which you can kind of tell because there is some really mean spirited stuff in here that goes on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was pretty fascinating actually, reading up
Yeah, and
on that.
actually I didn't honestly even know that that existed. So that was quite a cool little input that you actually told me today. Um yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. I mean, it was that, and I think he had to stay in America, and he was in I think L.A. and there was a lot of just senseless killing going on, and he just like this. I mean, there's just killing just to kill. I mean, just people just going out shooting and this and that, and he's just like, I need to. I guess he twisted that in his brain, and that was another reason he came up with the script and everything. It just kind of his reaction to what was going on at the world at that time. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's fascinating stuff, man.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, we let's see, we're ready to talk about the infamous dog scene.
The dog scene, man. Oh man. Um, yeah. Go ahead, Corey. You wanna you wanna bring to light that one?
Yeah, so pretty much like I don't think I really got when Frosty and myself were sitting together watching it. I honestly don't think that I told him about the dog scene, and then right before the dog scene happened, I was like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna love this." And about that time, when she first initially walks up and the dog like starts going ape shit. I think she grabs like a stick or something, hits the fence, and then out of nowhere, this dog's like, "You bitch!" and then goes after this girl and just like chases her for like what seems like miles.
It
Chases
really
her
does,
to
man.
chases her to, of all places, what a coincidence, the killer's house.
Yeah.
You know?
Very, very coincidental.
Yeah,
She just so happens to pop into that house.
yeah. Oh, and before we get deeper into the dog scene, um, so the scene where she gets killed off, um, where obviously the killer comes in and you hear spy, you know.
Hmm.
I wonder if that's Dario Argento because I was told or I think I read it somewhere, but he narrated some stuff for this film.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, so I was wondering if that was potentially him, but I can't seem to really find it right now. But yeah, but that I kind of wondered that as I was watching it. I picked up on it. I was like, I wonder if that was Dario. Of course, it would have been in Italian, not in English, because the English version was dubbed over, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but back to the dog scene. So, what's your thoughts on this?
Oh man, it's just well, there seemed to be a pattern with with watching the film. I know in the beginning the first murder victim, she's walking home and she just gets attacked by this homeless guy. He just comes out of nowhere and just grabs her and then she kind of fights him off and then he's just like chasing her down and it's like where did this come from? It just just so random. And she gets in her house and she feels safe and she's taking a deep breath and the guy you can still see him in a couple of shots just creeping out like out of the window just watching her and stuff like that and then lo and behold she gets killed and the guy kind of like oh and he kind of runs off and but I noticed that watching it I don't think I've ever paid attention to it before as many times as I've seen this film there's just random attacks like with the dog and the homeless man and it's
Hmm.
just weird how that happens but I just thought that was pretty like a little tiny little dose of comedy especially with
Yeah,
the dog scene's just funny because that dog he jumps fences he climbs I mean he does everything to get to this girl and to try to tear her up and it's crazy man he's got like a vendetta against this girl I mean it's
he
it's
hates her.
wild
He has a pure hatred
he
towards
really
this
does
girl.
man yeah, he really did. And it doesn't seem like she did anything. She just walked by and he just started flipping out and going crazy and trying to tear her up, you know,
Yeah.
just out of nowhere. It just, I don't know. They're very like, they're just very out there scenes for the movie because the movie's kind of like, it's really got a straightforward narrative. Like I said, with this film in particular, if you're not used to Italian films or giallos or anything like that, this is
Hmm.
probably the most digestible for a mainstream audience goer because it has a straightforward narrative. It's not too contrived and it's not really like a bunch of style. I mean, there's tons of style in this movie, but it's not only just style. There's actually a story, and there's actually a story that has a twist, and you know you'll get involved with. So it's really digestible for a mainstream moviegoer to watch this one.
I, I can agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
definitely one I would. It's definitely one I would recommend if anyone said, "Hey, you know, what is this giallo, you know, subgenre?" Oh, well, you got to check out Tenebrea, man. Here, this is what I recommend. That would be the first one I'd recommend
yeah,
to kind of get their someone's feet wet to let them know what they're getting into a little bit.
yeah. And
Yep.
honestly, out of all my giallos, this is pretty much like the most watched for me. I think I watched this throughout the year at least 3 or 4 times.
No, yeah, definitely, man.
I think you revisit it too a lot, don't you?
I do. I think I've watched it since that Synapse Blu-ray came out. I was like a couple of years ago. I've watched it maybe 4 times, and then tonight I watched it, or yeah, right before the show, I watched it again just to kind of take my notes and do a little bit of revisiting. I watched it again for the fifth time, and it's just like there's some. That's the cool thing about it, man. As much as you see it, there's still things, and that's why I love film so much. There's still, as much as you see something, you watch it and you pick up on the other stuff that you never realized before, like or that you didn't think of, but you grow as a film fan and you learn stuff, and it's really cool. That's why I love revisiting films, especially ones that I really really love, because you always find more to love. You know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's definitely what I would do. I a lot of times I sit down and I just critique the hell out of a film. Um and that's ultimately one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah,
Um
absolutely, man. There's a lot of familiar faces in this movie too. If you're an Italian movie, like horror movie fan, that you see, you know, you got Dario Nicolodi appearing. You have Anna Perioli, I think Perioli, the
mhm,
the first victim.
yeah.
She's been in a bunch of good, I mean, amazing stuff. Like she was in Inferno. I mean, you talk about Inferno, great film. She was in House by the Cemetery, a great Fulci film. Um, and of course, Dario Nicolodi. You know, she was married to Dario, and you know, she's Asia Argento's mom. Um,
Mhm.
and she's been in tons of stuff. She actually wrote um, Suspiria, but I don't think she got a writer's credit for it. So
Mm,
yeah,
that's cool. I didn't know that either.
yep. And John Saxon, of course. There's, I
Yeah.
mean, just character. I mean, just really like, of course, a couple of Italian directors make cameos. Lamberto Bava
That's the
pops up. Yeah,
he's
he,
the what was that repairman, right?
yeah, he was like a maintenance man, and he had a little like a little assistant. But it's funny. I looked at him and I saw him and his assistant, and Lamberto Bava totally looks like Mario, man.
Yeah.
He looks like Mario. So I'm like, that's like they look like Mario and Luigi with their outfits on, and it was pretty
Dude,
funny. I was like, if this had come out a little bit later, they might have been picked for the Mario and Luigi, like the Super Mario Brothers movie, because they
so
look
so
just like
funny.
them.
Funny you made that reference. I sat there and I thought that was Mario Bava at first, and I told Frosty, I was like, "Oh, right there, that's Mario Bava," and then he made the reference. He was like, "Oh, what's the other guy's name? Luigi?"
I'm
Because
telling you, man,
yeah,
they could pass.
it
They could pass for them.
really.
They really could. They look like plumbers.
But on top of the huge cast list that they got, I mean, just let's go ahead and just take a moment and let's say, it's not an Italian horror film unless you got some really beautiful Italian, women in this like in the films in general.
Yeah.
Um, and that's one thing Italian films do not shy away from. And I think there's almost a class to it. You know, you had in the '80s, you had all those TNA films that came out, so and it was more or less kind of a sleaziness to some of them. And even around the same time period as this, what you said that what was it? New York Ripper came out around the same time.
Yep. And same
Um,
year.
yeah, same year. So, and that's that's notably one of Lucio Fulci's sleaziest films. You know,
It's easily his sleaziest film.
so
Easily his sleaziest film.
oh yeah. So I mean, with that being said, there's almost a class for just Italian films in general and the women in the Italian films. I mean, it almost shows a sense of yes, we can show a woman nude, but we're not going to get carried away with it,
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah,
and again,
especially with Argento, he finds a way to make it. I say more or less him being the forerunner for it. He finds a way of like not over um how to say over sexualizing them in a way. He doesn't like you said, just very classy, and it's very the way he frames the shots and the way he edits it. It's not sleazy at all.
no,
Um, so yeah, but there is yeah, there's he's got a way. I think I've heard a quote from Argento, and maybe this is why people label him a misogynist. He said, "I would rather in my movies kill um, or murder him saying that because he's actually playing the hands of the murderer.
yeah, obviously,
Beautiful women than ugly people or something like that." And I just thought that was fascinating, and I can't I can't remember what he elaborated with that with, but he did say that, and I thought that was a very interesting quote from him. Um, I don't know. He's a character. He's an eccentric, and I think that's what I like about him. His films genuinely seem to take on his personality, and he doesn't shoot films for. It doesn't seem like he shoots films for a studio. He shoots his films that he wants to make, and that's why I always respected Argento.
yeah,
So yeah, but I mean the basis of the story is Peter Neal, um, and this is probably getting into the spoilers, but um, he finds out that the killer is a I think he's a book reviewer for a cable station that interviews him and finds out that he's kind of taken this mantle of being a I'm going to kill for the morally corrupted people, the people that are um, labeled more or less like sleazy people and people that are, just going out and doing nasty things. He wants to be, the righteous person and kill all these corruptible people. And he takes that mantle based on the book Tenebrae that Peter Neal wrote. So he takes that and twists his mind, and it kind of drives him to do this and kill. And when Peter Neal finds out through a line of dialogue when he's being interviewed off camera by this book reviewer, he finds out that this is the guy that is the killer. So he goes to his house and um, he kind of they kind of spy on him. Him and his assistant spy on them or on him, and they kind of like figure out that you know there's another killer essentially. So there's two in the
hmm
film. So it's pretty fascinating. And then when you find out who the killer is, it's pretty neat actually how they kind of twisted it, um, and actually got to that point. But there's a lot of themes in this movie, man, that I've picked up on, like why the second killer is doing what he's doing.
yeah,
Because there's a lot of like scenes where you see somebody struggling like mentally with something, and you never see the silhouette of the person. It's always the person's eye, and
hmm
they're taking medication, and they're trying to like it seems like they just have a massive headache, and there's a lot on their mind. And we find out at the end why that is and what happened to cause that. um which I think is pretty fascinating. It's really, really, really neat how that all led up to the ending. Um, because I mean, I've seen this movie a lot of times, so I can't remember exactly when I first found out who the second killer was. I was like, oh wow, I can't remember if I picked up on it right away or I didn't.
Yeah.
But watching it for as many times as I have, I just love how he structured that and how it played off in the end. I mean, what do you think about it, man? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and it's not often you see, obviously two killers in a film, but I really love the storyline on how, okay, so Peter Neal found out that, yes, the he found out early on who the essentially the serial killer is, and then he used that to his advantage because I'm pretty sure what is it, halfway through the film it's kind of explained, Peter Neal's ex-wife and his what is it, PR or manager or whatever,
Agent, yeah,
um,
played by John
agent
Saxon.
John Saxon, is sleeping around behind his back. So essentially, she left Peter Neal for John Saxon's character.
Hmm.
Um, so and uh, you get a sense of, well, he doesn't know about this, because it's portrayed so well in the film, and then
Exactly.
lo and behold, he did know about this, and that's the climax of the film. This is the reason why you have a second killer, because he feels that he could probably just get away with it very easily, you know.
Yep.
And
Given the fact that there's already a killer with that motive or with that mo, he's
yeah,
like, well, I could kill, which he ends up doing. He kills Cristiano Berti, who is the book reviewer for the cable station, kills him, which is funny. When he does kill him, Cristiano says, I killed them all. I killed them all. I did it. I did it. I did it. So he's almost like completely obsessed with Peter Neal's character,
yeah,
and he's doing it. He's doing these killings as like a tribute. But then there's one part where he says his last kill is going to be the kill of the great corruptor, which evidently would be Peter Neal. So I don't know. I never really understood if he was going to come after Peter Neal and kill him, or because Peter and him, I don't know, seem to have a banter. So I never really knew if he was going to come after him in a sense. But of course, Peter Neal takes the opportunity to kill him and say, hey, no one knows about him being dead, so I can continue on killing the people that I want to get out of the way. And all the blame would be shifted on him because he he's already killed. So he would take on that mantle and just he essentially kills people that he has to do. And there's an interesting thing when Cristiano kills, he's more like sleazy about it and sexual about it, and then Peter Neal kills out of passion. So his kills are quick and abrupt, and he just gets to the point. Which
yeah.
Cristiano kind of takes like small pleasure in what he is doing with the he kills with the razor blade, and well,
Which is again
and
very passionate.
right,
Oh,
he's more of a lingerer. He likes to like make his victims suffer, and Peter Neal's just like, no, I'm just killing out of necessity, essentially. So, but the ending is great, man. The whole last 15 minutes of the film is just fantastic. It really is. There's so many bait and switch moments, and it's just played out so well. I mean, and I know you know what I'm talking about, the scene where Peter Neal is essentially found out by one of the um, one of the police officers and or one of the detectives, and he accidentally kills. He didn't mean to kill the one detective, but she kind of popped in, and he thought she was somebody else. So
yeah,
he kills her, and her partner comes in, and there's a moment where he's like, "Oh, I just knew it was you," and he's going to arrest him, and Peter Neal, he's like, "Get up," and Peter Neal's on the ground, and he slowly gets up, he pulls out a razor and slits his own throat. So you're thinking,
hmm,
oh, he just killed himself because he couldn't handle, what he did and going through the process of going to jail and everything. and the officer takes his assistant Anne, and they go to the car, and he realizes something's not right. So when he goes back in without Anne, he goes back in to check. Peter Neal's gone, but there's a silhouette exactly the way he framed it was perfect.
Hmm.
Right behind him is Peter Neal, and he takes a whack at him with the axe, and it's just really, really fantastic the way it's done.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was. I mean, that whole, like I said, the last 15 minutes of the film are just bonkers, man. There's
Yeah.
a kill which me and you have talked about is one of the most. It's weird to say, but it's one of the most beautifully shot arm amputations of all time.
It happens so abruptly too.
It really does, man.
Yeah. The whole scene is what is she doing? Is she's sitting with a gun, right? She's about to
Right.
kill herself or something, right?
Yeah, she's I think she's wanting to kill Anne because she called Anne and Peter Neal's assistant and
Just
called
like
her up
baiting her to
because
come.
yeah,
Yeah.
essentially told her where she was, and she was going crazy, and she makes a beeline for the house to see her, and unfortunately, well, no, she gets killed before she actually sees her, which is just insane. Like you said, it's very abrupt. It happens very quick. There's a window, and of course, Argento. There's always a motif with him about broken glass,
Yeah.
and sure enough, there's a lot of broken glass in this film, and the axe just comes right through the window and just bam, just chops her arm right off, and just the blood spray along the wall. It's just crazy, man. It's insane how that was filmed.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
basically he just does what he needs to do because, like I said, he's more of an opportunist. He has to. He's like he needs to do what he's doing to get to his goal. And there's a backstory with Peter Neal and why he did it. Basically, Peter. This is not the first time he's killed. Which the first person he kills in the movie is, of course, Cristiano Berti, the original killer. But we find out through, like I said, flashbacks and everything throughout the movie that he was. It's really you don't really know what happened. You just kind of can piece it together for yourself. But basically, there's a bunch of guys and a group, and they're above this girl, so she's like on her knees. So you're kind of thinking what's going to happen, and then another guy strolls up and just smacks her in the face, and um, she, of course, wasn't expecting it, and she's kind of pissed off. So she kind of motions to the other guys to hold him down, and they chase him down on the beach, hold him down. She spits on him, and she's wearing like these red high heels, and she basically puts the not the sole of the heel, but the
The
the heel itself into his mouth,
yeah.
kind of insinuating oral, sex.
Mm.
And I look at it as another theme um, that feeling that he was, you know, not only embarrassed, but like his sexuality was taken from him in that moment. Like he was. It's kind of hard to explain, man. Um,
Well, she
desexualized,
actually.
yeah, desexualized at that moment, or demasculinated, or whatever that word is. Um,
Yeah.
because I mean, it happened in front of people held him down, and then after that he finds the opportunity to get revenge on her, and that's his first kill. So basically, he had subdued this for so long, and then when he gets to Rome and he's thrust into these killings and all the stuff that's going on, it kind of awakens that bloodlust in him, and he's like he takes it as a opportunity to get rid of all the people that are dragging him down and making his life miserable. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of themes in this movie, man, and that the demasculinized, like I don't even know if I'm saying that right, um, but that's one of them for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what I was talking about with the flashbacks of the killer holding his head and just going through something. He was all going through that, and I think it awoken after he gets thrust into all these murders. It just awoken that dormant killer that was in there, and that's why I guess he writes, or they make it seem like he is a misogynist, and then it makes sense that he would be because of that happening in his past. Because I know his which is funny, it's his friend, the girl that sits down and interviews him for the first time. She basically they're making small talk, they're really friendly, and then all of a sudden she snaps and she's like, "You're a misogynist pig. Why would you write this stuff? Is it to sell more books? Is it to sell more copies and this and that?" And he's like, "Well, wait, hold up. You know me. That's not how I am in real life, like you know me better than that." But it turns out that he was like that, and that he did harbor some resentment toward women, which
Mm-hmm.
in an ironic twist, that girl on the beach that does that to him with the red high heels actually played by a transgender actor.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Played by a tranny, man.
Wow.
Crazy, yeah. Oh, it's really ironic.
What's Ava Ava Robbins? Is
Robbins,
that her
yeah.
name?
Mhm.
Wow, that's funny.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately Peter Neal had strong feelings towards Anne, Daria Nicolati's character.
Mhm.
Um, because in that scene where you were talking about, where he's obviously in like the where he went to go kill Jane, his ex-wife. Um, but when he went in, he killed her. Obviously chopped off her arm, whatever. She was out of the picture, and then all of a sudden, uh, what we think is Anne's character, and obviously he thinks it's Anne, or Anne walks in. He hits her real quick with an axe, not knowing who the hell she was, knocking her down, and then that's when he's kind of losing it, because I think he actually did have strong feelings towards Anne.
Yeah.
And if he would have gotten away with all this, I think that he could have probably played it off as kind of a hero of the day with Anne.
Mhm.
You know.
It seems that way, which is kind of funny to his character, with him harboring some resentment. Maybe he just found something in her that was very different and just snap. I don't know, because they had a history, and at one point, they sleep together, and she said, "Oh, 6 years that we've known each other. This is the first night that we're together." And he mentioned something about his fiance. Um, he's like, "Well, I can't remember her name." Um, oh, Jane. Is it? Wait a minute. Is it
Jane.
Jane? Yes. He said, "Well, Jane, in those 6 years, Jane would have been here to disapprove or something like that." So they had always, you could kind of sense that they had always had like feelings for one another, that they just couldn't act on. Um, so when they
Yeah.
when they when they do, I mean, maybe that does like kind of change things for him, and maybe he, like to your point, if he would have got away with everything, maybe he would have been happy with her, and they would have run off and been together. But
Hmm.
ultimately, that doesn't happen, and Peter Neal has a rather crazy demise at the end of this movie. Um, it's really crazy. This giant piece of art just falls on him, and it just impales him, and it's so crazy the way it's he's trying to pull it out, but his blood is just slipping off of it, so he can't get any grip on it, and it's just he looks like he's you know just it really is a fitting end to his character.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then Anne's just sitting there screaming and screaming, and then the film ends, and you can still hear her screaming.
Credits roll. Yeah.
Yeah, credits. It's such a, like I said, man. I love the ending. I love every part of this movie, man. I can't recommend this movie enough. It's such a good film.
Yeah.
Such a good film.
Yeah. I'll agree to that. Um, we talked about earlier on. We talked about some of Dario's best works, and in my opinion, this is one of my favorites. And like I said, we even talked about the Three Mothers trilogy and how much of a favorite at least the first two is amongst all Dario fans, and I actually surprised you a little bit when I sat there saying that Suspiria obviously doesn't cut it for me as much as Inferno does, which is it's a different toll for me. But overall, I would say this is probably one of my favorite Argento films. Um, I just honestly can't say enough about this one. This is a great one.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you there. This is definitely one of my top Argento films, no doubt. I just think I really think he hit that peak in like with Inferno, and then well, I'd say Suspiria, Inferno, and then this, and then that was the peak for me
Hmm.
in his career. I mean, he's just never, and since hasn't been able to top that. He never will, man. That's just it's too nostalgic for too many people, and people love those three films. I mean, Inferno kind of gets a bad rap because it just was followed. It followed Suspiria, so that's his what people consider his masterpiece. And it just got a bad rap because it's the movie that followed the masterpiece, so you can never live up to it. But I'm with you, dude. I love Inferno too. I think it's got a beautiful color palette and it's shot so well. And like I said, we talked about our favorite scene is the same scene. So this goes to
Yeah.
show his influence, man. And it's so fitting that he had Baba shoot that scene, the underwater scene, because
Hmm.
Baba was he was Baba's protege. So it was
Yeah.
fitting and that was toward the end of Baba's life. So unfortunately, he passed away right after that. So
Yeah.
yeah, but this
Which,
movie, man, I'm telling you, Tenebrae. If I had to list out my favorite, I would say, man, it's tough with I don't know because I love Suspiria, man. Um, Tenebrae probably is my favorite Argento film, though, man. If I'm being honest,
yeah.
yeah, if I'm being perfectly honest, it just there's so much to love about this movie, man. It's just so much, and not taking away anything from his filmography because he's a legend. I mean, all his films were. I always find something in every one of his films, and I don't know, man. Just Tenebrae is top upper echelon for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely agree with that.
yeah.
All right, man. What do you think? You think it's a wrap, man?
It's a wrap. Like I said, I know you don't do ratings, man, but this one I couldn't rate it either. I mean, if I had to, there's really not much to knock on this film at all. So I'm just
Yeah.
gonna give it a high recommendation, strong recommendation. Go
That's
out and
yeah,
see it.
that's pretty much what I do as far as rating. I just tell people I highly recommend it, or I recommend it, or I don't recommend this. Don't waste your time. But in this case, if you haven't seen it and we've spoiled a lot for you, you won't be disappointed if you pop it in and watch it
Oh,
afterwards, just because
so
it's
fun.
it's just that good of a film.
It really is, man. It's a fun ride. I know what happens every time I watch it, and I still just have a blast with it. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Definitely check it out. Highest recommendation I could give. Strong recommendation.
Yep. Alrighty. Well, that's gonna conclude the review, I think, on this film. Um, Tony, why don't we work on doing some more Argento stuff or just Italian stuff, since that's probably our favorite subgenres. Um,
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I like I said, I can talk Italian horror all day. Um, it's it's so it's so different from American horror in so many ways, and I think that's what I love about it. It's just a different take, and I dig it. Like I said, it's hard for some people to sit down and watch Italian films because as as North American viewers, you're not susceptible to that because you're just not used to it. But when you've watched enough and you just get used to it, you just fall into it, and it's just like eye candy. You just love these movies so much. So yeah, I'm with you, man. I would definitely love to do more Italian horror.
oh yeah,
No doubt about it. Maybe some Fulci. Get some Fulci in there. Some Bava.
I'm definitely, yeah, definitely. Oh, we gotta hit Baba, definitely.
Oh yeah.
But all right, guys. Well, you've been listening to the Midnight Monster Corner Horror Podcast, and like always, like, share, subscribe, and tell us what you think about this film. If you guys have seen this and you guys want to spark up a conversation, leave a comment down below. And also head over to the Facebook group, and that's where you'll find Tony, Frosty, and myself. And we can spark up conversations there as well. And if you guys have a preference, you guys want us to do a review, let us know, and we'll try and get that out there to you guys. Tony, you want to add anything, man?
Oh no, man, that was perfect. Like I said, like any reviews are welcome. Like I said, I'll be down to watch whatever, man. I'm just happy to finally be podcasting. It's been a long time coming. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, man. We've talked about it forever.
We
So
have
it's awesome, man. Thank you. Thank you. Thank Frosty. Thank you guys for having me on, man. It was a blast.
definitely, and like I said, hopefully we can just kind of continue it, and you just ultimately be the third host at this point. I think Frosty would like that. Frosty, he kind of adds a different mix to the whole podcast because he does a lot of video games, and then he also does stuff like westerns and kung fu stuff like that. He collects a lot more out of the genre of horror than obviously what we do, but um, he really adds a kind of a mix to it. So when we're out movie hunting, a lot of times he's picking up westerns and kung fu, and then he'll talk about it and stuff. And it's kind of opened my eyes a little bit. And one of the things is we were at Eric's the other day, and I never even knew that Fulci did a western, and you told me about it once I talked to you about it, and it blew my mind. So he's opened my eyes to a whole different ball game as far as the spaghetti westerns and stuff. It's got me kind of wanting to collect a little bit there. So
Oh man, I can't tell you how much. That's another thing, man. I've really, really been getting into spaghetti westerns, man. I'm telling you, they are so much fun. I mean, just and yeah, Fulci has dived into pretty much every genre. He's done comedy, he's done westerns, he's done a little bit of everything. So he's done mafia movies. I mean, he's dabbled, but he's always going to be the king of horror. He's always going to have just that resume with all the horror output that he put out. I mean, it's incredible. But man, I'm telling you, to your point, there's some great spaghetti westerns, man, and I've just been really getting into them lately, man. I love them. They're so much fun.
yeah, that's definitely got me wanting to start collecting on that aspect. Mainly just pretty much like you said, spaghetti westerns in general. So
Yeah, I definitely make a point if I'm out and about and I'm movie hunting or anything like that. If I find a spaghetti western, I'm grabbing it because I want to watch them. I want to watch as many as I can. They're just so much. Like I said, I know I sound like a broken record, but they're fun, man. They're really fun.
yeah,
Um, I mean, of course, there's the timeless ones like the Dollars trilogy and you know stuff like that. And then there's Once Upon a Time in the West. That's a great one, but like I said, you dive into that rabbit hole and you find those really, really off the beat ones, man, you're in for a good time.
yeah. But yeah, man. Um, well, I think that's gonna be it for everyone. Um, Later, guys.
Later.